shocked as I am. But no, we got to talk about Xbox, man, because again, the layoffs have been crazy. More information is coming out as time goes on of all the layoffs and all the companies that are being affected right now. In this segment, we're going to talk about Blizzard. We're going to talk about Bethesda. We're going to talk about Minecraft for a very special reason. We're going to talk about especially id Software. id Software has officially announced that they're losing 50% of their company. 50%, as they just released their new DLC, by the way, for Doom the Dark Ages, which I still have to do because I got to get my perfect achievement back. But regardless, let's talk about Xbox because Asha Sharma has essentially pointed the finger at Phil Spencer's strategy for the reason why all these layoffs are happening. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you guys want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join me every single day, 9 p.m. over on the main channel, where you can catch me live every single day, 9 p.m. Eastern. I hope to see every single one of you there. Now back to the main video. I honestly love that. I love that because she's basically saying, listen, I'm the Reaper, and I am going to trim the fat that Phil Spencer put on the body that is Xbox. I'm going to trim the fat. I am the Reaper. In all seriousness, though, guys, let's talk about this. So, looking at this, I want to mention a couple of things. Number one of the things we talk about all the time, literally all the time, is the fact that subsidization is a real thing, okay? What do I mean by that? Well, subsidization is so real when it comes to Xbox that every time we talked about some of their more questionable decisions, like Avowed, for example, or like South at Midnight, for example, or honestly, even Outer Worlds 2, which I felt like should have been a little bit more of a slam dunk from Obsidian, but they completely messed that up as well. There's a ton of video games that went under Xbox's umbrella that nobody looked at and thought, why would you make that? Why would you spend so much money on that? Well, come to find out something massive, okay? And this is something we've known for a long time. Now, normally when we talk about subsidization, we're talking about it from a governmental level. We're talking about the fact that a lot of these studios are from places like Montreal, for example, where government subsidies in terms of gaming, as long as you hit certain check marks, you know, like in terms of DEI and all that, as long as you're able to do that, you get a bunch of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars given to your studio. And, you know, it could be tax-based, it could be grants, whatever it may be. Subsidization is extremely easy if you're outside of the U.S. right now. It was easy when you were in the U.S. too, but then obviously when Trump got into office and cut the USAID money, things got a little bit rowdy for these studios that are in the United States. So the studios that are outside of the United States are perfectly fine for the most part, but there was another level of subsidization that realistically I didn't talk about in terms of Minecraft or Xbox, but I have talked about something similar in terms of like Epic Games and Fortnite. Right? So Epic Games, their store loses insane amount of money. The people that are coping and saying that Epic Games is profitable, you're out of your mind. Epic Games store loses an insane amount of money. For an entire year, they only made $335 million on third-party sales. If you want a comparison, Steam makes anywhere between $1.5 to $2.5 billion a month in third-party sales. Billion with a B. And that's in 1 month. Epic Games did 335 in a year. Now, Fortnite carries Epic Games. Fortnite subsidizes pretty much everything that Epic Games does to try to get themselves out there and relied upon by the industry. The industry looks at Epic Games for obviously Unreal Engine, and they utilize Fortnite as a means to push it out there. Come to find out, Xbox was doing the exact same thing with Minecraft. Minecraft is the reason why there were so many other weird business choices that were happening at Xbox. Charlie Intel says Xbox was previously using profits and revenue fund Minecraft in order to fund the rest of the Xbox business. So we're not even talking about the projects. We're talking about other aspects of the business as well. Minecraft, one of the top selling video games in history. if not the top selling video game. I don't remember if they're number 1 or number 2. But the fact that Minecraft is the reason why all these other projects existed, it just goes to show that these projects don't exist on their own merit. They only exist because somebody else who's more successful allows them to exist. It is literally subsidization, which is something we talk about quite often. And Microsoft, I kept telling people, the bots didn't want to listen. They didn't want to listen, which I get it. I understand. I'm just a chud. Whatever. I don't care. Realistically, anybody with a brain could see what was happening at Xbox, especially with Game Pass, and you could clearly see that Game Pass was being subsidized by something else. Whatever that may be, now we know was Minecraft for the most part. But Game Pass was being subsidized. These projects that were being put on Game Pass, it was amazing, bro. Game Pass was literally being filled with a bunch of games that nobody wanted for the most part. Outside of a couple of day one video games that made the service somewhat worth it, realistically, they just padded Game Pass to be filled with a bunch of nonsense because they were going for quantity over quality, because Game Pass was a machine that had to constantly be fed. And the moment you couldn't feed it anymore, that was it. It was over, right? You had to keep the machine going. So Xbox's Game Pass was subsidized on top of everything else. So you have a service that's being subsidized by Minecraft. You have the video games that are being put on that service that is being subsidized by Minecraft. All these things are being subsidized by Minecraft. And it's because Minecraft is so damn successful. It makes a disgusting amount of money. It makes more than Fortnite, if I'm not mistaken. So realistically, when I see something like this, I'm like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And then you start looking at the restructures, right? You start looking at Bethesda telling staff that it will restructure around their strongest franchises. Why are you not focused around your strongest franchises already as it is? You know, me and Wizard were talking about this when we were playing Gears of War. And it says the following: Bethesda will reportedly rebuild around Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Doom, Quake, and Wolfenstein. Look at these franchises, bro. Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Doom, Quake. When's the last time you heard Quake? Quake and Wolfenstein. These are all like super masculine franchises. Maybe Doom, Quake, and Wolfenstein more, but realistically, these are like super masculine franchises. Now suddenly this is going to be their focus. Why wasn't this your focus before? Why weren't you focusing on trying to give the best of the best that you possibly can with these franchises? There's a reason that Elder Scrolls is in development hell right now. Where the hell is Elder Scrolls 6, Todd? When you said 16 times the detail, did you mean 16 times the development cycle? Like, what's going on with Elder Scrolls, my guy? Seriously. So anyway, looking at all that, this kind of brings us to another part that's going on as well, because there's another avenue of this that nobody has been talking about, which is Blizzard, right? With the sword of Microsoft hanging over it, Blizzard has now quietly dropped Overwatch in Korea into the hands of Nexon. So now Blizzard has handed over the reins of managing Overwatch in Korea to Nexon. So they basically, kind of let that part of their business go. Nexon is taking over Overwatch publishing duties in Korea starting in August. So they don't even want to deal with this is amazing. It really is. So Blizzard's being felted by this, and then you have id Software. You have id Software. This is really bad, right? id Software laid off about 50% of their studio. Before we get into id Software, we got another story about subsidization. Not only was Minecraft subsidizing the entirety of Xbox, but you also have Elder Scrolls Online. The developers over at Elder Scrolls Online say that the MMORPG has basically funded other failing projects at Microsoft. So they're literally taking money from their wins in order to subsidize their losses. But the thing is, it's not just subsidizing losses that you didn't know were coming. It's subsidizing projects that you pretty much knew was going to be a loss anyway. But you decided to subsidize it anyway. So you're stealing money away from the development team over at Elder Scrolls Online, which is really messed up, by the way. You're stealing money from their success, and you're pushing it on nonsense out there like South of Midnight or whatever. Like, what the fuck? What is going on here? This is why when people look at the business, like, you guys really just completely screwed the pooch. You literally decided to waste money that could have gone into these projects to make them even bigger than they were. You could have expanded upon Minecraft more than you have. You could have expanded on Elder Scrolls Online more than you have. But because these companies, these the little bit of successful games that they had, because they had to subsidize other projects, these games could never expand past, the small limitations that they had because of their funding being taken away. It honestly is pretty stupid. It really is. You should be investing into the project that won you over or won the fans over and not investing in nonsense that nobody wants. So anyway, let's talk about id Software, because id Software has somebody who was part of the company for 20 years that decided to just completely rip into Microsoft, and said Xbox decided half the team was no longer needed. Now, again, this is going to come from an emotional standpoint, and I don't necessarily agree with, talking about this stuff from an emotional standpoint, but I do understand somebody investing decades of their life into something and then having it taken away. I can understand how that could be a little bit emotional, so I get it. Few people are madder at Microsoft for mishandling of id Software than Michael Maynard, a game developer of over 40 years and an id veteran of 21 years, who was caught up in heavy layoffs which hit the studio as part of widespread Xbox cost-cutting. Maynard's story demonstrates the institutional knowledge that's being sacrificed in the name of spreadsheets. Well, hold on, time out. So, as I've mentioned before many times, not every single person that's being fired from these studios are bad. I know that people out there want to make it seem like that's the case, but it's not. Let's be real. It's really not. Are the majority of them? Probably. But, is all of them? No. But the truth is that when things like this happen and studios start getting massive layoffs because the studio as a whole has been effing around and finding out, unfortunately, it's going to be collateral damage where you are going to lose people that have many decades of experience, people that you really should not be losing. But the truth is that chances are those people that have decades of experience are also the ones that are paid the most. So naturally, if they're looking for cost-cutting measures, they're going to fire the people that make the most money. Most of the time, 95% of the time, that's what's going to happen. Outside of executives who seem to, get their golden parachutes. But, if you're talking about developers, that's going to happen. The good workers are absolutely going to be collateral damage for the bad ones. Unfortunately, there is a lot more bad ones than good ones. So I don't want to make it seem like, because again, this article is going to make it seem like this guy is all of them. And that's not true. All the people getting fired are not these veterans that have 20 plus years of experience. That's not what's happening here. They're going to use a guy like this to try to paint that picture, but that's not what's happening here at all. But anyway, Maynard's story demonstrates the institutional knowledge that's being sacrificed in the name of spreadsheets, with multiple studios gutted to the point that they're unrecognizable, if not outright closed, and his criticism echoes the pain and fury heard around the industry. But see, here's the problem that I have with this. The problem that I have with this is that you guys want to complain about spreadsheets. You want to talk about spreadsheets as if it's a negative thing. Brother, you can talk about this any way you want, and you can try to tie your emotions into this and you shouldn't fire people. You shouldn't do that. Spreadsheets need to be balanced. The numbers have to make sense. You guys are using your emotions to argue with someone else's money. This is not your money that's on the line. This is the company's money that's on the line. And if the company doesn't have money to pay you, then they're going to let you go. It's absolutely insane if you expect a company to continue to pay you even when they can't afford to pay you. So you can constantly talk about how, this is people's lives on the line. Yeah, we know that. Of course, people know that. It happens all the time. But it's a business at the end of the day. And if the numbers aren't making sense, then they're just not making sense. And the only way to make them make sense is to balance the sheet. So you can complain. You can complain about the sheets. That's fine. And yeah, maybe you can have a conversation about maybe focusing too much on it could be bad. You can have that conversation because you should have a level of ground level knowledge with your developers that go past the spreadsheets. But you can't completely ignore the spreadsheets. And that's what's the problem. They want to completely ignore them. They want to they don't even want them to exist. It's you should hire and fire based on emotions. No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. You should hire based off merit and you should fire based off merit. And if someone is not pulling their weight, which as we have witnessed, again, we're not the ones that put out those videos from those studios. We're not the one that put out those videos from Double Fine and Compulsion Games. They're the ones that put out the videos of them essentially being in adult daycare. So if you guys are not pulling your weight and you were just allowed to run free for years, I think at a certain point it's fair for them to say, all right, the numbers just don't make sense anymore. It's time to pull the plug. You know, I think that's more than fair at this point. And if you're thinking that that's not fair, I think that's insane. But in any case, so realistically, they are losing 50% of their staff, and this is now bringing them into question, like, you know, Doom the Dark Ages. What's going to happen with that? You know, the DLC did come out, and it's doing okay. Last I checked, we can check right now together. The DLC right now has a 24-hour peak of 13,812. So a decent amount of people picked it up. About 1/3 concurrent players compared to the original decided to pick up the DLC. But again, realistically, I don't think anything is going to save it. It's too late. You guys went too far. You just went too far with it. And now, unfortunately for you, I mean, the time is now. That's really it, man. The time is now. There's no way that you can avoid it whatsoever. So yeah, even though you lose people like this and it's unfortunate, realistically, it's going to be collateral damage. You know, it's going to be collateral damage. So that's basically it, boys. Xbox all around the board. You know, Asha Sharma and the fact that she's pointed the finger at Phil Spencer. Probably not necessarily naming him by name, but more so just complaining about the way things are being ran. She says it. We simply spread ourselves too thin. Again, they were losing 64% for every dollar invested. That's crazy, bro. It's really ridiculous. So complain about the spreadsheets all you want, but the numbers have to matter.